On this episode of the Crush the Rush podcast, we're getting a little personal. And I was trying to think of the best way to share this episode because a lot of time that I sit down and I sort of write ideas for podcast episodes, or I'll ask my clients for feedback of like, what do you actually want to hear? And sometimes they're just like, I just want to know like what you're doing and how you're doing. And if I'm being honest, it feels a little weird to share that, but you guys asked for it, so we're going to go behind the scenes and talk about how I am navigating what I would say motherhood, relationships, being a CEO, and all the things that sort of encompasses being a woman and running a very full-time business on what I'd like to say is a pretty part-time schedule, which I'm super excited about. So at the time of writing or recording this episode, I do write some bullet points when I record podcasts. We are about to head out on a 6-day trip to Texas. So every year in February, I host a retreat for our mastermind members. And the one in February is out of town because we live in Ohio and no one wants to come visit Ohio in the middle of January or February, although right now it's super sunny. But anyways, this year we're in Texas, which brings me to the personal update. And that is our goal as a family is to travel once a quarter. But for those of you who don't know, I have twins who are 10, and I also have a stepdaughter who is 25 and she lives in Austin. So if you can sort of see what we did there, we have a family rule that we have to have eyes on Heather every quarter. You can tell that I love quarters. So we moved our mastermind retreat to Austin so we could have like a double dip, right? Like a business and a family sort of activity. So in this week's episode, I really thought it would be fun to just go behind the scenes and talk about what's happening personally, kind of just like a coffee chat, right? Because 95% of the time, most of us start a business to actually have more free time and improve our personal life. And I thought the best way to give this update, because I'm like, well, what do? Do I just like talk to myself, which is super weird and awkward? So I was like, no, we're going to make a list. So in a typical Enneagram 3 fashion, I was like, you know what? Let's do it in categories. So if you have our Crush the Rush quarterly planner, this is actually how we do it in quarters and in categories. So here we go. I typically like to have 3 or 4 categories or buckets or priorities a quarter that I'm focused on. And the first one is personal. So this month I turned 45, which writing that number makes me feel a little old, especially the Grammy Awards just aired. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know who some of these people are. And they're like 12. Anyways, I am really excited about this age, regardless of how that initial feeling made me feel, because for whatever reason, I tend to think odd numbers are better. I also think your 40s are like the era and I wrote to like have more fun. Like if I go back and I look at my journal over the last couple of months, it's like have more fun, have more fun, have more fun. So that's really been a cool goal of mine. But I think also looking back, like my 20s were really heads down in corporate. So I was working 40 to 60 hours a week. My 30s were pretty much twins. I mean, 2 babies at one time will definitely take priority. And then my 40s have really been, I would say, like stepping into me, right? So I started my business at 41. I am prioritizing personal care more. And I would say that this is not just facials, although I did just get micro needling done, which could be another podcast, but also a lot of therapy, a lot of yoga and friendships, right? So I really have been trying to really think about like, how do I want to feel and what does this look like from a personal standpoint? And so that's sort of what my focus has been personally, but also it's like really little things like I talk to my best friend on the phone, like almost every week. We Voxer every day. Like my husband and I take walks together every day. We have date nights. We're going on vacation. And so I really tried to build up this support system, both business besties that I can like hang out with and talk to in Columbus, but also family support system and friends that I really like could not imagine like not doing life with. So I would say, yay, 40s are where it's at. Second in our categories is family. So my girls are 10, which means we are in this sort of like wild, not yet a teenager, but I see signs of the stage and I know it's coming, which makes me really nervous and anxious, but we're just going to like go with the flow. Thankfully, they're still into slime and squishmallows and not Stanleys and Uggs yet, but I can see it coming. So we finally broke down and got them an iPad. I've talked to whenever I do podcast interviews, we always have like before and after conversations. And I've talked to a lot of, corporate moms or business moms. And I'm like, I'm probably going to be the strictest mom in the history of moms because we don't have gaming systems. Most of the time, they're not allowed to play any of the games on their screen, but they're making videos and dance routines, which feels good to me. So that's what we're sticking to. We've also implemented 20 minutes of reading a day as a family, which has been really fun. We honestly did this more in the summer, and then we sort of like lost track of it over the holidays, but it was selfishly a way for me to finish the Court of Thorn and Roses series. So I'm on the last book and I was like, I've got to get it read. Like it's 900 and some pages. So we all have these like book goals and we've been sort of reading through it together. Which in this season, we turn the fireplace on, we get all cozy, and hopefully it's something that we can continue on as we get into spring and summer. And that's where sort of personal and family come together. So we've planned, I'm calling it a 45th birthday trip, but we're going to France, Switzerland, Austria, and Germany as a family, which means a full 2 weeks offline, which again, if you talk about things that make me nervous, that's definitely one of them. We've done it before. I know it's possible. We're setting up our business to be successful without me being online all the time. But to actually do it and like be in a different country is a whole nother thing. So we'll be sharing more of that behind the scenes. But that leads into number 3, which is business. And I actually questioned whether I would share this publicly or not. But my husband has, I think, convinced me that I have high functioning anxiety at certain times, right? Because most of the time I wake up at 5 a.m. I've got like podcast episodes like scrolling through my head, which is probably another episode. But right now in our business, we aren't pushing anything really big, right? Like we're not going for the big launches. We're not going for the like turn your business upside down. The whole goal this year is to use what we have and really lean into what I teach of, hey, how can we income stack? How can we scale more with what we have? How can we be more efficient? How can we set up systems that like help us do more with doing less, right? So this year is all about slowing down to speed up. And anytime I slow down, I get really anxious because I still think I'm deprogramming myself from the corporate world because it's just like ingrained in my body that you have to work like 50 hours a week. And I'm not working that much. And we've sort of, we're 2 years in of not doing that, but it still feels weird. So sometimes I just have to share that because I think people are like, oh my gosh, it must be nice, like not having to work on Fridays. It is, but it feels weird to me. So what does this specifically look like behind the scenes? Well, we're going back and we're making our programs better. I always think that it's important to continue to level up your client experience, right? Like, we had as an example, a content planning course, which I did in 2021. I still teach the same thing to this day, but are there things that have changed that I can make better? Yes. So we're going through and sort of improving and updating and adding in automations. And if I could tell you the flowcharts that I have created in the last few weeks about how this like all comes together and works together, just makes my heart really happy, which even though I feel anxious about slowing down, I could tell that we're on the right path because it feels really, really aligned. So last year, we really started to dig into how do you just do less better and really dig into our mission as a family of more quality time together, but also as a company, like how do I help you design your dream schedule where you're at, right? Like we want to have different options so that depending on where you're at, you can pick and choose. But going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, I just want to make business more fun. And I think when you control your time, you control your outcome, which then means more fun. So last but not least, the question that I get asked, and it's not really a bucket, but it's like, how do you manage it all? And I get this question a lot. And I think it's not a one size answer. And sometimes I don't manage it all. Sometimes there are meltdowns or anxiety. That's real life. But I have 2 go-to mantras, and that is, if it's not a heck yes, then it's no. And my friend Whitney always says this, but like, if you're thinking about doing something, if it's not a, oh my gosh, this feels so aligned, I'm in, then maybe just take a pause and think about like, hey, I'm going to think about this a little bit longer. So if it's not a heck yes, then it's no. And then when things get crazy and I feel like my to-do list is 100 items, What is one thing that you can do today to make a difference and feel better? So my friend Heather always says, how do you want to feel, right? So if you're feeling overwhelmed today, my go-to is how can I feel better? Most of the time it has nothing to do with business. It's like eating well, taking a walk, and being like, hey, what's the one thing that I could do today to move the needle? That's when I'm going to start to feel better. So while this episode is not your normal strategy pep talk, I thought it would be helpful to hear how you're sort of like strategizing things behind the scenes and sort of pulling in personal goals with business goals and travel and all the things. Really layer in how therapy led me to believe that my 40s are going to be the best, right? It's the best era. It's the fun era. It's the joy era. So traveling makes me happy, and that's what we're going to focus on doing more from a business perspective. We're also just leaning into how we want to operate as a family, and then how that sort of structures our business and how we want to run it, which really gets back to what I do share on our strategic pep talks every week. So I can't wait to share more about how we're digging in to make your client experience working with us extraordinary. And I hope you liked this little personal update this week.